Hi there, and welcome to Demystifying White Papers. I'm Jen Kelly, and I have my colleague Greg Bridges here with me.
Hey Jen, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Excellent. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. It's going to be a great webinar. We've got a webinar here for you, and the subtitle of it is How to Get Better Content and Generate More Leads Through White Papers. We're going to be taking you through how to write white papers, how to, like, the whole process of it, how to market it, and typically there's some problems that we have seen in our years of doing white papers. So with that, let's get started, and we will get this presentation happening for you. Okay. Demystifying white papers. So this is us, your co-hosts for the webinar today. I'm Jen Kelly. I'm joined by Greg Bridges. A little bit about us. We both own our own marketing companies, and we've been collaborating on white paper projects since 2015. We both are formally educated in marketing. We both favor working on B2B marketing campaigns and projects. We are Canadian based. We've been working virtually with clients since 2015 all over Canada and the US. Little fun facts about us. We've only ever met once in person. We've done everything else totally online. And when not writing white papers, Greg is a champion Canadian Australian football player. And when I am not managing white paper projects, I like to get into the kitchen and whip up some complex French cooking. So that's a little bit about us. The projects that we have worked on, so we've mentioned that we have been working on white papers since 2015 for various companies, and we have covered some really exciting industries, products and services that we've written white papers for. And now these include B2B software solutions, IT services. We've done work with retail technology services. So that would mean, so if you can imagine, if you imagine a large big box retail store and all of the computer software it takes to get that store up and running, processing orders, and then shutting down at night, that whole technology stack behind it, we have written white papers on those solutions. We've written white papers on data analytics. And we've gone all the way from data all the way over to automotive, and we've done some work in the automotive industry.
Yeah, and in addition to that, we have also done white papers for commercial design, so interior design, office design, kind of where that's heading in terms of open offices and the shift right around the pandemic specifically in that one. We've done a lot of different writing on organizational culture change, how you can set your organizational culture, what that means for the people who work there. Scientific instrument leasing was an interesting one for us, an industry that we didn't really know existed, but if you picture large medical devices or scientific devices that are used in lab environments, those are often not purchased outright, and so that was an interesting one for us. Skilled nursing facilities was a software for long-term care homes or other facilities such as that, where they need to manage kind of all their resident information, all the data that comes with that. And also real-time spectrum analysis. So if you picture the wireless signals kind of traveling through the air from your Wi-Fi, from your mobile, if you needed a device to detect that, that would be real-time spectrum and analysis. And so there's all kinds of different applications for that. And that's just a list there. I'm sure over the years, there have been many more that aren't listed here. But this kind of just shows the broad kind of spectrum of different projects that we've worked on together.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's been a real interesting journey for us. And the reason we're putting together this webinar is because throughout our journey, we have found that there are several pitfalls, several problems that happen when a company decides, hey, let's do a white paper, all the way to getting it published and then promoted. And these are some of the pitfalls and some of the problems that we want to cover, and make sure that you can cross those problems as they come. One of the first things that we'll cover in this webinar today is the build it and they will come. We have that quote in there because typically white paper projects can be so involved that the feeling sometimes is by the time it's published, we've done this huge effort. People are just going to come on by and download this magnificent piece of content, and unfortunately, it's not that way. And we'll help hold your hand through, getting you to the finish line and then beyond. So today in this webinar, what we're going to cover is what is a white paper, what its purpose is. Depending on what industry you're from, you may have a different perception of what the use of a white paper is or could be. We'll go through what companies should use white papers, because there's some companies and industries that absolutely do not need them, and there's others that very much lend themselves to white papers, and of course others that they may not be thinking a white paper would help them. And then we get into the 5 common problems costing months of time and thousands of dollars while you're running your project. And we'll get into the strategic alignment need, the focus need, the deadlines, the ownership, and of course, the promotion of the white paper. We'll finish up with what to do instead. So every problem we tackle, we provide a solution for you on that. And throughout this webinar, so our education may be enough here. We've got a white paper to accompany this webinar. We've got this webinar. We've got a checklist to download. After watching or reading this content, that may be enough to set you on the right path. Absolutely. But we want to be clear that at the end of this webinar, we do have the promotion and some paid programs to work with us as the team that will lead and get your white paper done. So if this is enough for you, that's great. If you need some more help, we're here to help.
Awesome. So let's dive in here to what is a white paper. So across different industries, there are a lot of different definitions for what a white paper is. And we see sometimes that when we talk to companies about white papers, that maybe they have a kind of a different idea in their head. So just for example, in government, white papers also often refer to, policy or legislation. In pharmaceutical companies, it may refer to a really scientific document, something that's really aimed at another scientific audience. Or in high tech, you see it as often really long and technical documents. But in a marketing context, we really mean something that's meant to be, at the level that your audience is at. So informative, educational, and really trying to help them do their work better. And so we've grabbed a definition here from HubSpot. And HubSpot defines a white paper as a persuasive, authoritative, in-depth report on a specific topic that presents a problem and provides a solution. And some of the reasons we like that definition is just because it talks specifically about a specific topic. It talks about a problem and solution format. And really, it should be in depth. This isn't just a long blog post or something that you can kind of put out in a couple of days or something that's easy to write. This is really meant to be more depth and in more detail than that. So if we go into the next slide, we can look at kind of how we approach a white paper. We see them as long form content running somewhere between 2,500 and 3,500 words. And like I said, they're not a long blog post. And more importantly than that, they're not necessarily promotional. So obviously at the end of the day, you do want your readers or your audience to kind of take an action and either to move on to that next step in the buying process and eventually become a customer. But these are not necessarily the documents that are going to be really sales focused and really, really heavy on the promotion and product side. This is meant to be educational, informative, and really guide your audience into what that next step is going to be. So we've just listed here quickly a sort of who, what, when, where, why, and how. So the who is for your audience, and we'll talk more about kind of how you can choose that audience and specify that audience. The what will be one specific topic, and I think that's going to be a theme that you're going to hear throughout this conversation is how do you kind of get that focus and really narrow down what that one specific topic that you really want to cover in detail is going to be. When, these can last anywhere from 12 to 18 months and be refreshed, usually fairly simply, to kind of extend their life. So we see them as, a once a quarter kind of document. They could be once a year. Given the timelines involved, I don't know if you want to go much faster than that, but you can definitely really kind of get a lot of life out of the white papers that you do. Where to be published on your website, but more importantly, to be further promoted via campaigns and other tactics. And we'll discuss some of the ways that you can really get a lot of life out of your white paper, so that you don't just put it on your website and wonder kind of why it's not getting the results that you expect. And the why is ultimately because you've either tried other things, or you have some other campaigns running, but maybe they don't necessarily align with the requirements and kind of what the goals are of this project. And so white papers are distinct. They're different than a lot of other different pieces of content. And so, they can fulfill a need that if you have those requirements, they're very useful. And how ultimately it's by just having the right process and the right people. So at different parts of the process, and we'll show a timeline of what that looks like, different people can come in and really contribute. And so kind of setting that up and following that process is really important to getting a good result at the end of all the time and effort that you put into a white paper. Jen, anything I missed? Anything that you want to add on to that?
Not on that. That seems pretty succinct, and we can dig into that as we go on. So that was a great intro. So like Greg said, the purpose of a white paper, I mean, it is a little bit different than any other marketing campaign or marketing tactic that you use. And it really is meant to be the foundation of a larger marketing lead generation campaign. So the white paper, while it can be out there to generate leads, build the thought leadership, that kind of thing, it really is, it's the first step in a specific campaign. Now, when we say here in the second point to generate leads, so you want the people that are having the problem that your product or your service solves, as those are the folks that you want as ideally qualified leads. This is a lead generation content piece for sales, and it's for sales to start to follow up and to start the qualification process. When we talk about building thought leadership is something that many executives either want to keep or want to aspire to, and that can kind of be a tricky minefield of how to start that. Producing a well-written, in-depth white paper can start you and your company on the road to thought leadership. And when I say on the road to it, definitely a well-positioned and well-written white paper can get you out there. But it is like anything, through the follow-up and the follow-through, that it makes sure that you rise in your thought leadership within your industry, and you stay there. Folks that are not ready to buy, once they download your white paper, and this is where we talk about it going into a larger campaign, that would be the kind of thing that where you might set them up on an email drip campaign where you're keeping in touch with them. If they're not ready to buy now, perhaps 12, 18 months away, they'll be ready to buy. They have expressed interest in your product or your solution or your company, and it's important to keep those leads warm. If they are ready to buy, they've downloaded the white paper, they like what you have to say about your product or your solution, and they're ready to get the sales process started. That's, of course, up to your sales team to come in and move that process forward for you. So we come to who should use white papers. I guess technically anybody can use white papers, but we have found that there are certain industries or certain companies with products or services for sale that really lend themselves to white papers as opposed to others. So what we have here is, it's typically a B2B, typically B2B IT type of content that is used for white papers, but it can expand out of IT, out of software. So it's really any company that has a complex product or service to sell that's going to need a few pages, 2,500 to 3,500 words to really explain. It's typically also with companies that have a long sales cycle for their product or service, or it's a high ticket solution. So a high price point may take the buyer or the buying committee several days, weeks, months, even years in some cases to really comb through with the research and make the buying decision. On the other hand, who should not use white papers? Well, we said anybody is able to. If you have a very simple or low cost product or service that can be bought on a whim, on emotion, or on frequency, you're probably not going to need a white paper. And an example of that, Greg and I always joke around on is, are you going to buy Pepsi or are you going to buy a can of Coke? That kind of simple purchase does not need a white paper for it. However, within that industry, if you were selling into the B2B side of like fountain soft drinks and you had a contraption that made it more efficient or faster to serve that product, that actual solution may lend itself well to a white paper. But anything that is simple and emotional buy, low cost, lacking novelty, lacking complexity. Someone can decide, yes, I want this now, or I need this now, or I choose to have this now. Typically doesn't need a white paper. We get now into our white paper problems. We've got 5 of them. And these are the typical problems that we have seen time and time again throughout managing and working on different white paper projects. And we have solutions for each one of these. So bringing up a problem and solving them with a solution. As you listen or watch this webinar, this presentation, if you're finding that you think, oh, yes, our company has these problems, don't despair. These are common problems. And we've got some really practical solutions to how to get over these problems. And these are typically things that we see running virtually every white paper project that we have been involved in. And just to say that if your company or if your white paper team is running up against these problems, all is not lost. We'll just give you some tips how to solve them. So the first one is no strategic alignment. So, Greg, what are your thoughts on this? How often have you seen a company that is doing a certain thing business-wise, but then wants their white paper to do something else? Is that a problem, and why is it a problem if you're not strategically aligned?
Yeah, and it is a problem, and I think, kind of as you led into, a lot of these are really common problems, and this is one that we see a lot. To take it kind of to the beginning, a white paper in this case is a tactic. It's a very tactical piece of content. It in and of itself is not strategic, right? So when we talk to companies and we hear, we want a white paper, well, that's excellent. We're really excited by that. But the kind of questions that we'll ask is, why do you want a white paper? What do you want your white paper to do for you once it's written? What do you want your audience to do once it's been read? How does that align kind of with your overall business strategy? So, for example, a white paper can often be used to launch a new product or to enter a new vertical market or to expand your market share within a specific segment. And if those are some of the strategic goals that you set for yourself as a business, you want to make sure that your white paper does align with that, and that it is kind of, it does have the right messaging and the right content within it to kind of move you towards those goals. So that's sort of the challenge we hear is that people kind of see white papers as living alone or living really as a standalone piece of content. And the solution to that really is to take a step back and say, okay, what is the purpose of this? Why was, as you mentioned, this format chosen? What does it allow us to do that maybe our other pieces of content don't? And if you can really sit back and then align that with your business objectives to make sure that it aligns with your overall business strategy, you're going to be able to, as we walk through the next 3 or 4 problems, really be able to focus what you're doing and make sure that you have that strategic foundation in place. So without that strategic alignment, both with the marketing strategy and with the overall objectives of the business, it's far more difficult to choose a topic, to kind of solidify your position, to demonstrate your value to your audience. And as you kind of move through and you run into roadblocks or you run into challenges, it can be very difficult to just justify the amount of effort that's being put into it, and it can really lead to a lot of problems down the road. So we talk a lot about how you want to set that strategic alignment early. You want to sit with your white paper team and figure out what the purpose of this is going to be. And then that allows you to make your decisions much more confidently going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you say leads to problems, some of the very specific problems this can lead to is, so with our white paper process, so we have writer interviews. So the writer, so in this case, Greg is interviewing the clients and the subject matter experts in order to get the content, in order to write the white paper. And so if the idea of writing the white paper is not really aligned with the business goals, it kind of stalls the interview, because there's no strong flow about, like, okay, why are we talking about this product or service if the goals for your company for this year are to go in a different direction. So that's the kind of thing, it will stall out, and it just makes it harder to get the great content to make a great white paper. Bringing us to number 2, so the actual topic focus. The white paper problem number 2, so it's strategically aligned to what are your business goals, and then what is the actual topic that we need to drill down into and produce a white paper for. So typically, some of the problems that come up is there's one focus, and then another focus, and then another focus, and then another focus. And this is part of our brainstorming portion of our process, where we can get a bunch of ideas going and then pick the strongest one for sure. But when we find that the bucket of items is too wide, and it starts to be like we're going to have all these ideas right in one kitchen sink, because we just want to show how complex we think about things, or how our product or services covers so many different problems. And it typically comes out of, I guess, a good thing, in the way that the company is excited about their expertise, or how many different problems they can solve. But it really, really is important to narrow down on one. And if we find that there are 5 or 6 different areas of expertise that your company has, we would recommend that become 5 or 6 different white papers. It's really, and if we even go back to the quote from HubSpot, it's white paper is one topic, and we got to stick to that. So one of the solutions is for this, I know that we say this all the time in marketing: start with your buyer or your reader in mind and stay focused on them. They already, you're living and breathing your product or your solution or your company or your industry every single day. Your buyer is not. So we would suggest putting aside any kind of fears of, if you're just explaining one topic, having the reader think, oh, this is all they do. So no, that's not the case. But if you can focus in and clearly explain the one topic, that can help you build a lot of trust and a lot of clarity and a lot of expertise, so that the customer can, what else do they do? What else can we use them for? And with the third point there, more ideas equal more white papers. Obviously, a topic will have different layers to it, but we have seen, we had this one client, and actually they very much went along with what we suggested. Their one paper started to turn out to be 4 different white papers, and each of those stood on their own very, very clearly and very, very strongly. So one focus, one topic, we can go deep on that.
Yeah, one thing that we say often, Jen, is there's no bad ideas, right? So that what we don't want to do here is discourage good ideas. Mm-hmm. We want to make sure that they fit within the context of the paper itself. So one of the things, as you're going through your brainstorming process and you bring more people in and you do see, this kind of wide range of different ideas come up, keep track of those, record those somewhere and look to see, maybe they're better for, a future white paper, or maybe they can be used as a blog post or a form of content like a webinar or an infographic or a social media post. Anything that kind of comes out of it is often very valuable and can be used. But one of the challenges is, if you try to stuff all of that in paper, your reader is not going to be able to really follow along and stay focused. And as you're trying to establish your thought leadership, as we mentioned, you don't want your reader to come away confused or feeling like they know less than maybe they did before they started. And so that's why we always say, come back to your reader. What's their level at? What are some of the challenges that they're struggling with? What are some of the business or performance goals that they're trying to achieve? And then how can you speak to those in a way that aligns with your expertise and does ultimately align with your business? Because obviously this should, going back to point number 2, fit with what you're trying to do, or point number 1, excuse me, align with what you're trying to do as a business. So that's it's important, and it's one of those discussions that should happen early on, and possibly multiple times, where you really sit down and nail down what this topic is going to be.
Excellent. Excellent. Absolutely. That leads us into white paper problem number 3. No hard deadlines. I was going to say, Greg, do you want to take this one? Because if you don't get your interviews done on time, if you don't get your reviews back in time, that really affects the writing of the content.
Absolutely. And so, we referred to it at the beginning that this is not just a long blog post, right? So oftentimes with some of your content writing, you can have one meeting around it maybe, and you can really kind of pump something out that does what it's supposed to. In this, because of the level of depth, because of the level of kind of research, complexity that goes into a white paper, it is a long process, and it really does take a lot of time to nail down how you're going to explain these complex ideas. And we always say it's at least kind of a 12 to 14 week process, and we have a timeline on the next slide which will show you kind of what's involved in that. But when you don't stick to those deadlines, or when those deadlines kind of get fudged and missed a few times, it has a cascading effect on everything that comes after it. So know the timeline going in is easily the best advice that we can give. This is not a next day kind of turnaround thing, and it shouldn't be, because you want to allow time for new ideas to be brought in for the level of depth that you're trying to achieve. But commit to that process. Understand that that's going to be a 12 to 14 week process, and commit to that going in from the outset, because that is really going to solidify everything that comes next. And if we know, for example, that we need a review from a certain person involved, or a certain subject matter expert, or we need to bring somebody in at a certain stage, we want to make sure that we identify that early on in the process, so that they're not stuck with the document sitting on their desk and holding up the next step in the process. And it sounds like a really simple thing, but we see it often, and it's just a natural part of people being busy, of people going about their day-to-day work. But again, if we think about it as something that's strategically important for the business, it makes it a lot easier to say, okay, this needs to be something that we dedicate some time to at certain points within the process, and that's going to help us move it along. Because if you don't, you're not going to be able to start putting that promotion part into effect, where you start seeing your leads and you start generating the new connections and the new people in your email list, and new potential sales conversations, right? So
yes,
the only way to get to the next part, which is the part that you're trying to do, is to kind of nail this down and follow along and get it done in the end.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a funny thing. I mean, maybe inside, white paper joke or whatever, but we have heard from clients like, we're not getting any leads, and Craig and I be like, the white paper isn't done yet, because you haven't reviewed it, so it's not even out there to start generating the leads. So there is a process here. So Greg mentioned a timeline, and this is what we've got for our timeline here. So we'll go through this, and then we've got milestones, we've got owners, and we've got time. We'll go through the owners on the next slide, talking a little bit more in depth about who should be on your white paper team. And when we say white paper team, it doesn't have to be super formal. It's just that you're going to need a lot of different skill sets, and a lot of different people with those skill sets and those insights into getting the white paper done for you. Should I go through this, Greg, or do you want to half and half it, or how best would you like to explain our timeline here?
Yeah, why don't I lead us off? Because one of the first things that we have here is the initial discovery calls. And I think that's one of the really important steps within this process. And it should be used whether you're working with a writer within your team, but also especially, but in this case, a writer that's outside your team. So the writer often will not be a subject matter expert, regardless of whether they're internal or external, and at least not to the level that members of your sales team might be, or members of your technical team might be, or members of your executive team might be. They're not going to have the same level of depth and knowledge that's within the company. And so what you really want to do with these initial discovery calls is to be able to articulate some of those key points, to explain some of the key messaging, to tell some customer stories or some real stories of how you would approach this topic, or the subject that you actually end up picking. And those are really valuable. And oftentimes, Jen, you've been on a lot of those calls as we have them with executives. It's the stories that really are the most useful. And we'll hear, here's a story from a time when this happened. And you can really get some of that, those insights that you just can't get anywhere else, that you can't find through a Google research or something like that. And so we encourage those discovery calls. We encourage bringing in, multiple people if it makes sense. Subject matters with specific expertise, and like we said, executives with more of an overall picture, to really ensure that what you're trying to say can be captured, and that we can get your voice, and that we can get everything that you want to say into that paper. From there, what we found is that it's best to kind of work out an outline first. So now that we have the kind of business focus, the topic focus, and the information from the experts within the company, now is the time to really make sure that the white paper is going to be on track, and that it's going to cover everything that you guys as a client would like. So we suggest an outline. This is just short bullets. It covers the key messaging, covers some of the supporting research or statistics. And it's at this stage where your review team, the people within your company who are really kind of focused on this, should make sure that everything looks right, all the sections look right, what's going to be covered with it looks right, because that's going to form the basis of the drafts and ultimately the final papers. So this is one that we think we've put in place because we think it's really important, just to make sure everybody's aligned, everybody knows what's going on, the sign-offs happen from the right people, and it allows the rest of the process, once the outline is kind of solidified and approved, to move forward much smoother. Once that gets done, it can typically be, let's say, 2 weeks to get from the outline approved to the first draft of the paper. And this should be a stage where, pretty much everything is close, and we're able to get review suggestions, edits, to make sure that it gets closer and that your voice is captured. If there's, technical points that maybe we need to get reviewed from your technical team, that can all happen within that first draft. And then the second draft should be a near final version. That should be something that is very close, and we're really into kind of the minor changes and tweaks at that point. At which point the final copy is delivered. And Jen, do you want to walk through what happens once that final copy is really solidified and approved, and what has to happen next with the design?
Sure, absolutely. We do recommend having design and layout happen professionally. Yes, you can publish, a Word document and just slap a cover on it. I mean, that's fine. You can do that, but we would highly recommend for the readability of it and for pulling out key points in the white paper. It's really important to have this document well designed. You got to think about it. It's not only from a design point of view, marketing point of view, but if you think about if your white paper is used for a complex sale, complex product or service, it's probably not going to be one person at your your customer's site that's going to have the ability to say yes, no, let's buy this right now. That white paper may very well form the basis of an internal sale happening by the person that downloaded the white paper. They're taking it to their committee, their boss, their influencers internally in order to solicit agreements on the purchase of this product or service. So the easier you make this white paper document for them to pull out key points, key stats, key quotes, key diagrams, the more helpful it can be as an internal sales tool for your potential client. So initial design and layout, you want to make sure that you're having a professional do this. So professional graphic designer, professional person who is used to dealing with documents and laying them out correctly. And what we mean by that is there is a method to the madness to lay out long form copy in a way that is very readable, very approachable, and helps the reader with the endurance of getting through a long document. So by all means, this is very important. As well, it's going to be very important to have this on brand. So the right look, feel, colors, fonts, and look and feel design-wise of your company's branding is going to be important to have that reflected within your document as well. So it goes through initial design, and then of course there's going to be design edits and feedback, just like there is with content feedback and whatnot. That goes back for a second draft, and then you get to near final design, and then the final edits and the minor tweaks. So at this kind of point, or as you go through it, what are design edits? You might want to decide, are we using real photography? Are we using graphics? Do we need some graphs and charts or diagrams drawn specifically for the white paper? Are we pulling out certain stats? Are we pulling out certain quotes and giving them a visual treatment so they jump off the page and are really impactful? Those are the kinds of things that you'll need a designer's help to do. Once that is delivered, you're going to either have, I mean, these days we mostly see white papers delivered in a PDF format that can be emailed easily. So you want to keep that thing as small as possible. Typically, 1 to 5 megs, so it can be emailed around internally. Again, think of this white paper is supposed to help you, sell your product or service. So the easier you can make it to be shared internally at your potential customers, that will help as well. As well as is going to sit on your website and be downloaded. So it's got to be easy for that to happen. If you are going to have printed copies of the white paper available, if you're running a workshop or you want to have it available for another in-person event, do think of that ahead of time and let the designer know, because there's a different way to set up certain files, whether they're being printed just off an office printer or whether they're going for real professional offset, high impact printing. It's just a different way that the files are set up, and the designer needs to know that going in. So the same thing that's on the web can look the same way if you're getting it professionally printed for your event. Once the final document is delivered, it's up to your marketing team to take it from there. But we have a total time in there of 12 to 14 weeks, 12 weeks typically, 14 weeks on the outset. And this would be the time that we would want you to think about committing to for your white paper. And then here are all the reasons why it takes that long, if you want to know that. But as you can see, with the team involved, and we'll get to that on the next slide, but it's really, it's a pretty tight process. If you're looking at every major step taking about a week, the longest one being the actual draft of the white paper to start with being 2 weeks. This is quite an efficient process.
Yeah, Jen, and maybe just before we move on to the next slide, I did want to ask you, because you talked about there being a method to the madness, and with a 2,500 to 3,500 word document, it can very easily become a wall of text that's very unreadable to your reader, right? And so that's why we talk about how important design is. How disruptive is it to the design process if content edits come back after it's been approved and it's already gone to design? How much does that really disrupt the graphic design process?
Well, a little typo here or there, a little sentence change here or there, not a big deal. If you're thinking about taking out several paragraphs or adding in several paragraphs, that does affect the flow of it. Absolutely, it does. And most of us that are not in design pick up any kind of magazine or book or any kind of printed material, and the words all just fit on the page, and we may not think about it. But there is a real skill, and that skill takes time in order to lay out long form documents in a way that both looks professional and is very enticing for the reader to read and stick with your document. So if we find out that there are going to be that volume or that much of a change to the content, it can be done. Just expect that it's going to take longer, because essentially the whole document has to be reflowed and somewhat redesigned to make sure, say, for example, the right diagrams are with the right pieces of information, and your page breaks make sense, and that kind of thing. So again, can be done, but it's going to add time to the process. All right, with that, let's talk about the team members here. So our problem number 4 would be a lack of ownership. And what we mean by that is there can be some great excitement coming into a white paper. And perhaps the white paper team, whether it is on the technical side or it is on the marketing side, says, oh, we got this great thought leader. We've got this great expert in our company, and he or she is going to be the one. You just got to interview them, and they can just download their brain, and it's going to be a great white paper. Well, what we find too is the white paper, it's more than just one person that's going to be involved. And even though you have that great person that, you know, in your company that that can produce or share with us all that kind of content, they're typically going to be at a certain level. And in order to fill in the gaps, to make sure that we're explaining your product or your service, explaining the problem, explaining how your company solves it, we're going to need different levels of expertise that we'd like to interview. So it's going to be your thought leader, and that's the person we're taking at the you know, that very high, very expert level. We're going to ask to bring in some subject matter experts, so more either if it's technical, more of your technical expertise, or more granular, or more perhaps frontline expertise on that, as well as some new ideas. Now, the thing is with this, where we talk about the lack of ownership, we want to make sure that you understand that there's a whole team of people needed, a whole bunch of different points of view on this one problem that is going to be needed in order to get your white paper to be really good, solid content. And when we say lack of ownership, it's the kind of thing where sometimes we find the thought leader is like, well, I did my brain dump, you know, we're done. Or the subject matter experts will be called in late and not realize that they can contribute to the white paper, or maybe there might be some hesitation with them, feeling that they are not strategic enough, or, you know, I've only been in this role 10 years, what could I possibly have to say? So there can be some fear around that. So what our solution is, it's just right away, first of all, understanding that there's many roles and experts, like experts of all levels needed, and they're going to be asked to come in at the right time to the white paper. And what we mean by the right guidance is, so in our situation, Greg will be doing all of the interviewing. And he will poke around and find that there might be some holes in some of the thinking that need to be filled in with ideas that only either, you know, the frontline experts or the subject matter experts can do. And that's where we'll want someone like that pulled in. So it's very important to understand that your white paper isn't technically, you know, specifically written by, you know, your in-house expert. The other thing is, we would suggest an internal sponsor being absolutely necessary. Now, this internal sponsor does not have to be an actual contributor to the white paper, but someone internal to your organization that sees this white paper project as meaningful, purposeful, and it's going to get done. So without that that guiding push, it's easy for a 12-week project to go off the rails when, you know, different fires are burning internally and different things need to happen. So having someone internally that is, you know, the sponsor, you know, leading the charge to get this white paper done internally will matter. They have to have enough weight to be able to push the process along if someone is taking too long to review, or, you know, not always available for the interviews. So that's really key. On the previous slide, we talked about, we had that owner column, and we've listed off some of the members that we need in here. So that we need a project sponsor, we need a thought leader or thought leaders in your company, we need the supporting subject matter experts, you need a writer, and Greg was quite right about, you don't need a writer that absolutely knows the subject area. You need a writer that is a professional writer that is skilled in taking ideas and putting it into the written word at the level of your audience. You need a project manager to make sure, like, all these cats are being herded in the right direction. You do need a review team, and the review team can quite seriously be folks that are not involved in the writing of the white paper. So the review team can be someone on the technical side, someone on the marketing side, perhaps someone on the admin side, to just get a well-rounded opinion of, is this representing your company, your product, your solution in the right way? And then, of course, you need that graphic designer. So graphic designer, typesetter, someone or a team who really understands what it's like to lay out long form content in a way that is on brand and enticing for the reader. Any other team members that didn't make the cut here, Greg?
No, I think that was pretty good. One thing that I want to talk about when we think about the review team, and you touched on it a little bit, Jen, is different people probably need to be brought in at different times. So for the owner, for example, the person who's going to ultimately have the final approval, they should be involved fairly consistently throughout the project, because what you don't want to have happen is you're kind of going along thinking everything's really good, get to something that's final or near final, and have that person who gets the sign off to say, wait, this isn't what I was expecting, this isn't what I went into the white paper thinking we were going to get. And so you want to make sure that the key approvals are kind of signed off each time. And the other thing that when we look at a review team is that, like you mentioned, Jen, if there are some technical people or some people who are brought in for a very specific section of the white paper, they don't necessarily have to review the whole document and provide wording edits and catch typos and do those kind of things. What their role within the review process really is to make sure, okay, did we get the technical information correct? Have we, sufficiently explained this in a way that your audience would be able to understand? Is it accurate? Is it in line with the solutions that you have as a business? And if that's covered in one or two sections, they can really focus on that and not have to worry about the rest of it. And that just kind of reduces the chance that, as people are busy, something gets stuck on the desk, and that, in the timeline beforehand, that sets off that whole cascade of the next steps being delayed or pushed back because one person or a group of people have not kind of been able to get to it yet. And when we just one more thing on this, Jen, and then we can go to the next one. When we think about that idea of a review by committee, that's often where we see, too many thoughts, too many ideas at the wrong stage in the process. So just really think about who needs to be on that team, what's their role within that team, and at what stages within the project you're really open to having, new ideas and new discussions, and at what stages it's time to say, okay, has this achieved what we set out to do? Is it in line with the messaging and the content that we want, and provide that feedback at that stage in order to keep things moving along. So those are the two things when I think about the owners and the roles that are involved in this. And if you kind of set those early on, you define who those people are going to be early on, it makes the rest of the process flow just a lot smoother.
Great. There we go. White paper problem number 5. So we've made it to the end of the 12 or 14 weeks. We've got everybody on board. We've got a beautiful white paper. It's well designed. Everybody's happy with it. Couldn't be more thrilled. Feeling smart, feeling amazing. And they put it on their website. And they wonder what's happening. That's the problem. Greg and I are under no illusion that the 12 to 14 weeks is a long process, and it's going to take a lot of thinking and a lot of work in order to get the white paper to publication stage. But typically, just like if you've ever worked on a product launch day is the first day of the work that's got to happen in the next chapter, if you will. Your white paper needs to get promoted. So just publishing it on the website and maybe just giving one announcement out there on LinkedIn or in your internal, your newsletter that goes out to your customer list about your white paper, that is not enough. We introduced the concept that white papers can last 12 to 18 months. That's 12 to 18 months of promotion as well. So even though, and this is where you have to start really thinking about your reader, your potential customer, even though you may be tired of the white paper, they're just hearing about it. So you have to give this piece of content the chance to work for you. And it does that through the promotion. So publishing it on the first day, that's great. We've got some ideas and concepts on the next page about how to take the white paper content or the white paper that you've written, all the content in there, all the great thinking, and then have it go out into the world in different campaigns that can be refreshed throughout the 12 to 18 months. Before I go forward to our diagram on this, anything more on this you want to cover, Greg?
Yeah, I think two things. One, you mentioned it on the last slide a little bit. There's often a hesitation, either during the process or afterwards, from the thought leaders or the people who were putting themselves out there, and that's totally understandable. I think it's if you haven't done this sort of thing before, it can be very intimidating to put your voice out there, to put your perspective out there, to call yourself a thought leader and try to position yourself that way. And so there's a little bit of a hesitation to put that information out there once it's been written down. And there's also maybe a fear or a little bit of a worry that you're going to annoy your audience. So like you mentioned, Jen, you put it out on social media once, you send your email newsletter once, and then you go, well, I can't do it again because, you know, my audience is going to get annoyed, or they're going to see that and think it's too much. And I think both of those, I mean, when you think about the value that you're adding within the white paper, you've gone through this process, you've done all the work, and you put something that should at the end of the day be really valuable to your audience. Those are two fears that can be overcome when you think about it that way, because you're the expert in what you do. Nobody that is going to read the paper is going to have the same perspective or that level of knowledge that you've put into this and done. And you're really, you know, you're not going to annoy your audience if you do it kind of the right way, because when you think about your email open rates, like an average email open rate's what, 25-30%. So not everyone's going to see it the first time. Not everyone's going to see your social media post. With everything that's online today, you know, you need to keep repeating, keep promoting, keep positioning it in front of your audience. And there's different ways that you can do that, so you're not just posting the same social media post over and over and over again. But you know, you want to give that value to your audience so that they can take it and hopefully do something better at the end because they've read your paper, and then B, you know, they recognize that you are experts at what you do, and that when they are ready to buy, whether it's right away or 6 months or a year down the line, you're in their head as someone who can help them solve their problem. So those are two very common and very understandable reasons to kind of hesitate at the promotion step. But you know, you really want to understand that you've done all this work, you have something valuable, and you're doing a service to your audience by putting it out there.
Absolutely. Great. And with that, we have this chart here. This chart's available for download and available in our white paper. So we've got two different columns here that showcase ideas and places, channels, how you can take the content that was developed from the white paper and have it go out into your industry to promote the white paper, the thinking, the problem that you solve in your products and services. So why don't I take thought leadership, Greg, and then you can handle the sales and marketing side of things. How about that?
Absolutely, sounds great.
So on the thought leadership side of things, so promoting a new approach or a new idea. So taking the content in the white paper and turning it into a webinar. That's exactly what Greg and I are doing here. So of course, if you download the white paper, there is more content in there, but the broad information that we have in our white paper has formed the basis for this webinar. Why are we doing a webinar? Different people react differently and like to consume content in different ways, and different pieces of content lend themselves for different types of mileage you can get out of the content. So don't be afraid to repurpose like that. Blog posts and podcasts. So blog posts, so there within your white paper, you're going to have different either chapters or sections. As much as we said in the beginning, you know, the white paper is not a long blog post, absolutely not. But parts of the white paper could lend itself to be a standalone blog post with a call to action at the end of that blog post to find out more or go more in depth on this topic and download the white paper. As well as podcasts. If your company is hosting your own podcast, you can take either snippets out or have the whole long form, depending on how long your podcast goes, and turn that into a real discussion. You could also use the white paper as a lead in to being a guest on other podcasts within your industry. Whereby you will talk about the problem and the solution and use your white paper as a great talking point there. Next, establishing industry expertise. So you know, one of the ways to do that is to publish what you know and to tackle a problem that folks in the industry are having, and then being able to suggest a solution around that. So there are, in every single industry, there's going to be trade publications, there's going to be associations, and you are able to get snippets of your white paper repurposed as an article, in those trade publications on those sites as guest articles. Next up, growing executive profiles. So typically, in our experience anyways, we've had at least one executive contribute to every single white paper. Sometimes it's a team of them. Other times, the thought leader is the one executive. So using this white paper in order to grow his or her executive presence. And some of the ways that can be done is the white paper can be used as the basis of a talk on industry panels, keynote speeches, or LinkedIn articles. Next up, demonstrating value to customers. So particularly with a highly complex product or service, it's going to take a little bit of explaining in order to show how your product or service solves the problem. And so that can be done in bite-sized pieces of content, such as videos, infographics, posts on social media. By no means do we think you're trying to get all of the information in the white paper into one social media post, but certainly it can be broken down into, I'd say, no less than 100 social media posts. If you think about different quotes, different pieces of information, different graphs, different illustrations that are in the white paper, can absolutely go out onto social media in that way. And then the last one we have in the list of the thought leadership here is gaining credibility with investors. So whether it is private investors or you are a company out on the public markets, you can have the information that is in the white paper form the basis of interviews and executive talking points, as well publishing content that showcases that they're tackling some of the problems that your industry has, and your product or service is an answer and a real solution to that problem is a way to gain the credibility with investors at certain steps. So those are thought leaderships or sort of ideas, and then actual, if we can break down the white paper of how the white paper can help you in those areas. So that's thought leadership. Greg, let me hand it over to you for some sales and marketing ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we think back to what our definition of a white paper was, it's educational and informative. And because of that, it's often an early stage piece of content, right? So it's someone who's less familiar with your company. They're researching, broad solutions to a problem. And so one of the things that we look at as a white paper being is really a foundational piece that can spill off into all of these other great tactics. And so thought leadership is one outcome of them. The other outcome is the more direct sales and marketing side of things, where you really are building up your list and generating new leads. So if we start at the top here, we see reaching new prospects. So again, this is early stage. This is a way to get your brand and your information in front of people who maybe aren't already familiar with you, or at least that you aren't familiar with them. So common tactics for this are paid ads. Often you do want to budget a campaign to do some paid promotion, not just your organic side, especially if you're kind of one of those smaller, medium sized companies who doesn't have a huge presence on social media or some of the other platforms. Definitely worthwhile putting a budget around promoting the paper itself, driving people to your landing page so that they're able to download it. And that gets you those kind of early prospects. Search engine optimization. I mean, that's one of those things that with any digital piece of digital marketing, SEO is important. That's definitely going to be on your landing page side. It can also be in some of the blogs and some of the other content that spills out. You can really focus the search around a couple of keywords that you've identified as important. Third-party campaigns. So Jen, you mentioned the industry publications, news sites. Site specific sites that your audience are going to visit. You can do those campaigns where, for a little bit of budget, you can have those organizations with established audiences promoted to their audience, and you can reach a large number of people who you're already pretty sure are either going to be interested or at least in the area that you're talking about. Generating leads. So this is the big one when we think of white papers is this idea of generating leads, and that's why it's very useful for those kind of long sales cycle, complex sales, multiple decision maker type businesses, because it is a great way to get people who, once they filled in their email, once they filled in their contact information in exchange for the white paper, you're going to be able to kind of follow up with them and do more marketing to them on an ongoing basis. So we see the landing page. That's the one that's going to have the form for download on it. Like I mentioned, blog posts already, webinars, all these different ways that you can get people to your site and exchange some form of contact information so that you can add them to your list and you can continue to kind of move them down the buying process and eventually get them onto a sales call. Building contact lists, obviously out of that you can get your email marketing. And email is a really vital part of a white paper promotion, both to initially launch the white paper with the list you already have, but also to take the people, like I said, who come in and you can send them emails with hopefully useful content. You don't want to spam people with stuff that they haven't really asked for, but if you can take that value out of the paper and out of the campaign that you've developed and be able to reach people who have shown an interest already, that's a really good way to kind of separate the early stage. Maybe they're just researching, they're not quite ready to move forward, they were just interested in it, from those ones who are further along the process, ready to buy. You see they're clicking on your emails, you see they're opening everything, and you can pass those top percentage of people along to your sales team. And that's how you do identify your top prospects, right? That's how you can separate out the ones that your sales team want to talk to from a broader list of people that are still maybe in that marketing stage. And out of that, you can get your sales calls, you can get your product demos, whatever your next step in that sales process is. White papers can be a really good way, and the campaigns that go around white papers in moving people along to that and getting people on the phone or getting people into a demo. And then driving conversations with your sales team. And this is one that is a little bit more internal. But when you think about the level of information that you've packed into this, the different people that you've talked to, the subject matter experts, the executives, all the people that have gone into this, this is really valuable information. And there's tidbits and there's stats and there's research and there's messaging, especially, that comes out of this that your sales team can use when talking to prospects or talking to leads or talking to customers. If, for example, you're on that sales call and you have it that you can see that this person has downloaded the white paper, as a salesperson, you can bring that up and use as either an entryway into that phone conversation, or as a question that you can ask to kind of stimulate some discussion and to see where their challenges are and how closely aligned they are. So we see that as training materials. You don't want your sales team to necessarily have to read the full white paper to understand the information. So bulleted list, key messaging documents, sales playbooks, short, brief, easily consumable things that your sales team can read. And then the messaging that goes around that. So it's all of those pieces that can be presented externally, kind of simplified down or condensed down into something really easily read by a salesperson when they're going to go into that meeting, so that they can go in and say, we saw you read this white paper, are you aligned? Do you have these challenges? Here's how we can help. And so it is just the beginning, the white paper, and it should be just the beginning. And once you find that you've gotten comfortable with this and you've kind of gone through this process, you can spend the quarter to write it, and you can spend the next quarter to promote it, but you can actually be at the same time writing your next paper. And so these can really flow into each other. Where the promotion of the one you've written can happen at the same time as you're writing the next one. And you can develop really strong quarterly campaigns out of this, focused on a specific topic, a specific audience, with all the content all aligned and working together. And that's really the outcome that if you want to take this kind of marketing strategy and this kind of process, that's really where it can head into something very repeatable, very valuable, and very focused around strategic parts of your business. And that's why we see it. It's just the beginning, and the white paper is just the foundation of everything that can grow out of it.
Beautiful. Well said. All right. So we're almost at the end here, but we've gone through our white paper problems, and we've given solutions. And if we're coming to the real question you need to ask yourself before you start to embark in this process is, like, do we need a white paper? We've got some bulleted questions here, and we've got this wrapped up into a checklist you can download. So these are really yes/no questions. The more yeses you answer, the more you need a white paper. The more no's you answer, the more you don't need a white paper. And it can, as you can see, it's an involved process, 12 to 14 weeks. And it's the kind of thing that you really want to be sure we should be doing this before you launch in to do it, because it is, while we have an enjoyable time doing it and we can get you to the finish line, no problem, it is quite, a mental commitment and a time commitment as well. So some of the questions we go through is, do we have a complex product or service to sell? Just like we kind of made light of the Pepsi Coke, decision at the beginning of the webinar here. Do you have that complex product to sell? Yes, no. Do you have a new idea that needs a comprehensive explanation to make a case? And one of the ways to see this is perhaps either your technical lead or some of your sales folks are finding they are explaining things over and over again, or it takes a long time in order for the client to go, oh yeah, I get it. Okay, that may be a good rallying cry that you do have a need for a comprehensive explanation of what it is that your product or service is. Do we solve a problem in the marketplace? I mean, you have to think too, and the readers that are going to download and read your white paper, I mean, these are smart folks. And they're going to be able to see if this is a white paper that is, thinly disguised as a sales promo, or I guess our joke in in the business world, this meeting could have been an email, right? This white paper could have been a blog post. Like it really, it should have enough meat and be a real problem that you are able to solve. Have you reviewed your existing marketing options and agree that they're not right for this content? Do you have social media? Do you have, sales programs going out? Do you have email newsletters going out? Do you already have certain things you're doing in marketing wise and in running through all those different channels? Are you like, oh, none of what we need to do is going to fit into those areas, particularly because either they're not long enough, or the attention span on those areas are typically not long enough for the complex information that we need to explain? And that'd be a good vote that you need a white paper. Do you understand what a white paper can do for your company's positioning in your area of expertise? That's really key too. Like Greg and I went through, I mean, this is a 12 to 14 week process involving, a few different people in your firm. To take that much time and that much focus of your internal folks, it has to be worth it. It really has to be worth it for your company. Next, as we went through, will we promote the white paper after it's published? You just have to, or it's just going to be, a disappointing result. You're not going to allow this piece of content to be the workhorse that it really can be for you. Do we have at least one person in the company willing and skilled to speak on the topic? As we just showed on the diagram in the last slide, there is tons of opportunity for either the keynote talk, the podcast interviews, doing a webinar like we're doing right now, doing an industry presentation. The work that goes into the white paper really can lend itself to a very good talk, a very good presentation. And so, don't let that opportunity pass you by there. Do we have an internal sponsor? Like we said, this is a big project here. It's going to take time and mental energy away from your day-to-day activities. Do you have someone internally that believes in this and will help see this to the end? And then, do you have a writer and a process for starting, developing, and finishing the white paper on time? As we laid it out, we've laid it out as practically as possible. There's no rocket science here, but these stages have to happen. The enthusiasm has to happen. A process has to be followed, and a team to help you do that is the way to get you to the finish line. Any other important question we should have the folks ask themselves, Greg?
No, I think that was good. And I do want to come back just to the will we promote it. Make that decision ahead of time and set, a little bit of budget aside and resources aside to promote it. And if you're not going to, it doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't, but it definitely means you need to adjust your expectations of what you're going to get out of it. There's a time and place to stick a piece of content on a website, but your results or those kind of key metrics that we talk about when we think about lead generation, they're obviously going to be quite a bit less if you're not able to kind of back it up with some budget and promotion side of things. So that would be the key one. That it's one thing to do the white paper, it's another thing to really get the most out of it. And that's the one that I just wanted to come back to and say, decide on that, as you're deciding to do a white paper. That's really important.
Excellent. Excellent. And then you've gone through the checklist and you're like, okay, yes, more yeses than nos. And we're enthused about doing this. So let's go. What to know before starting. So you touched on this a bit about the setting the budget.
Yeah, so set the budget for both for the promotion, but also for everything that we've talked about that goes into it. So the project management of the whole scope of everything, the writing, design, and the promotion. Really be prepared for that. And Jen, I think we've used the kind of number of like 5 figures. It's
Yeah, about
not
five figures for it. Yeah.
Right. It's not necessarily a small project, but it's something that, you know, you can get a lot of value out of. And when we look at your performance metrics and KPIs, if the value of your service is real, or your solution is a high ticket item, if it's something that's in the hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars per sale, you can start to see how, you know, that initial investment in this kind of white paper campaign idea can be paid back, you know, by getting the right people to read it and by getting those people into your sales funnel. So those are the two right at the beginning. Definitely set your budget, you know, determine what your key performance metrics are and what you need to get out of it. And just make sure those two are aligned. If you're expecting to get thousands of leads to come in right away, make sure that your budget is aligned with that. If you have a smaller budget, maybe you need to scale back those performance metrics. Those are all the kind of conversations that you can have with the help of either your internal or external white paper team. They should be able to help guide you through what those should look like, but those are important. And then I think we've touched on this a lot, commit to the 12-week timeline. So this can it can drag on if that timeline is not committed to, and eventually people are going to get frustrated, they're going to get distracted, they're going to move on to other things. And once those delays happen the first couple of times, it's very hard to pull back and really kind of bring people back together to where they need to be. So commit to that early, identify who those key people are. Like we mentioned, you know, there's going to be the people who have the final sign off and approval. Make sure they're involved throughout. You know, if you need to get on somebody's calendar to have a discovery call or a meeting with a subject matter expert, make sure you know who they are and find out their availability. Those are the sort of things to know as you're getting started or before you kind of dive into the whole process of it. And then think about the promotion. You know, are we going to break this out into webinars? Do we have the tools and the software and the video editing capabilities we need to do that? Are we going to host a live event? Do we need to send invites out? Do we need to get people, you know, signed up and registered for something? Do we need graphic design assistance? Do we need, you know, social media posts scheduled and designed and ready to go? These are things that you should be thinking about initially, so that you have a clear vision of where you're headed, but B, again, you can bring those resources on, you can get the right people involved, and you can really see how once the white paper is completed, the value that it's going to provide to you as you kind of move forward. So those are a few bullets. Is there anything else, Jen, that you wanted to cover or in this kind of before starting area?
No, I think we did a good job of that. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I think we've covered everything. So it's just a lot more than sitting down to write a long blog post for sure. So
it is.
With that, we want to thank you for joining us on our presentation today for Demystifying White Papers, how to get better content and generate more leads. So next steps, you can download the white paper. We have these slides available for download as well. You can download the checklist that we talked about, you know, how to figure out is a white paper really for you. And if you come to the end of that and you just figure, we're not sure if we have, you know, a good white paper topic or not, we'd like to get a second opinion on that. Or if you're ready to move forward and you think, yeah, you know, we think we're ready, let's go. Either way, you can book a no obligation 30-minute validation call with us, and we'll get on a call with you and work out what direction your white paper could go in, or give you some more ideas on what to do next. So with that, just want to say thank you very much, and good luck with all your white papers.
Thank you.